Welcome to the Hack Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Barnes, providing right now solutions to some of your biggest teaching and learning problems. Now, let's hack learning. We have hacked leadership often on the Hack Learning Podcast, and today we are going to hack leadership again, but we're going to do it more from the point of view of a new leader. And we're joined by Naomi Austin, a building principal in Southwest Missouri. And Naomi and I go back a little ways from our connections on Twitter. She is a marvelous connected educator, someone who believes in global learning and loves to expand learning outside the classroom and outside the walls of the school as much as possible. And we've had many wonderful conversations about that. But today we are going to talk about Naomi's journey as a first-year school leader. She's coming off of being a building principal in her first year, heading into her next year. And we're going to talk about the hurdles that new leaders face and how they cope with them, and she'll share some of her own experiences. And as always, in Hack Learning fashion, we'll end the show with some what you can do tomorrow solutions for new school leaders, whether you're a first-year leader in a school building or in the private sector, or if you're a newer leader, we can always get better. So that's our discussion today, and of course ending with those right now solutions for new leaders. Naomi, thank you for joining the Hack Learning Podcast. How's it going?
I am great. Thank you for having me. I feel very honored to be on the podcast.
Great. We're excited about this, as always, when we have so many experts who are on the ground doing things in schools, in the classroom, in the office, and we just love hearing from people who are in the trenches making it happen. So I know from our many conversations that you have come through your first year as a building principal, and I think I was never a school leader. I was a classroom teacher for over 20 years, and quite frankly, I was a little bit afraid of the idea of being a principal. And I thought, I don't know if I could make that transition. And I know you've got so many great things to share. So tell us a little bit about your journey from classroom teacher into building principal, just a little bit of background maybe leading up to that transition. And then we'll talk about what leaders can expect to face if they are first year or newer leaders in a school building or in any leadership role. So give us a little background.
Okay, well, I'll tell you there were a couple moments last year when I was wondering the same thing, if it was a little too scary to make that transition. There were some moments where I thought going back to the comfort of my own classroom sounded like a good idea, but those were brief and they passed quickly. I was a secondary English teacher. I knew that I wanted to get into the role of leadership. I found myself, as a leader within the building and leading other teachers. And I knew that as much as I loved having my own classroom and the relationship you build with your students, because it is much different, the relationship with students in your classroom every day versus the relationship that you build as a principal. It's still good, but it's different. I knew that I was willing to give that up to be able to facilitate change. And I'm lucky enough to be connected with some great people, such as the Hack Learning Group, that sees the need for change. And luckily, in the district I was in, I was able to facilitate change in my classroom and still kind of juggle between what the district mandated. But I knew that that wasn't always best practice. And so if I could be a leader in my building, then I could really facilitate that change. So that was kind of the motivation.
But that's education, though, Think about how many times in your career as an educator that you've thought you were going down one path only to diverge to another. That happens so often. So it sounds to me, Naomi, that you wanted to make more change as a teacher, that you were doing your thing in the classroom, and you thought, boy, it'd be nice if I could influence others, is what I'm hearing. So you then said, maybe I can do that from a leadership role. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say, and though I didn't, like you said, the elementary building wasn't really where I saw myself. But once I got in that position, once I got to know the staff and really to see the things that the elementary had already started. For one, they were already working towards standards-based grading. They were one-to-one with iPads, so I knew technology was a really important part of what they were doing. My vision for education and the things that were already started within the building really meshed up much better than if I were going for the secondary position that was open. And so it ended up being a perfect fit. And I don't know if I could imagine myself anywhere but an elementary building now. So
that's great. And, I think that if we're going to impact change, if we're going to really have change in education, I always say it feels like it has to start sort of at that ground level, which is the elementary. I think I've seen in my experience a lot of districts that maybe a middle school building or maybe an upper elementary school or one of their buildings of many are really sort of on the cutting edge of change, but it takes a long time for that to flow outward to the other buildings. So I said, I wonder if we start some change and we really do things progressively at an elementary level, if that change can then flow upward. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, for sure. And it's not just, what's happening with the students, but it's how you're growing your relationship with your parents. So,
such a key role, the very important stakeholders.
Right. And I mean, especially with something so fundamentally different as standards-based grading, at some point, this is all my parents are going to know. So it has helped the change for sure.
Definitely. So, from your experience with Hack Learning and with Hack Learning series books that we're big believers in identifying the problem and the hack, and especially that what you can do tomorrow role. What can any educator do tomorrow to make change? So tell us first, if I were a new principal, a new leader heading into a new position, let's identify the problem that new leader faces. So think back to your own journey and your own experience in your first year. What would you say if somebody said, hey, what problem or problems did you face immediately that you think, man, these really have to be hacked? Give us at least one.
Well, some of the things, it's identifying who your major role players are. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty difficult in the beginning because it's, not always how people present themselves, in the beginning is kind of, by Christmas you're going, maybe they're not, that's not quite the role that they feel, you know what I mean? You just can kind of, when the honeymoon period's over, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Then you kind of really know what roles everyone is playing in the school. So I think if I had it to do over that before I started, I would have probably put out more surveys and tried to spend a little more time individually with teachers to find out really where their heart was, what did they think was going well, where did they think things needed to be tweaked. And that's, I think it's really difficult in your first year because you're just getting the lay of the land yourself.
Right.
So, really trying to find that time to reach out. And that's something in my second year that I'm definitely doing differently. In fact, next week, I've got a couple half days scheduled with different small groups of teachers so we can meet together and have some collaboration for what is our vision before school. So before we get into the whole big body staff meetings, we're going to have some little side meetings where we can collaborate and really get the feel for, what worked last year, what do you see for this next year, and then just really trying to figure out what are their personal goals.
Yeah, that's really a wonderful approach. We just did Hacking Leadership not too long ago. We published from the Hack Learning series from Joe Sanfilippo and Tony Sinanis, two very well-known leaders. They really hit upon some of these things you say, that the idea of knowing who your stakeholders are, and really identifying them and finding your strengths immediately. They talk about surveying, so I love that you're doing that idea of, first of all, putting something out there that is easy to use, that's not sort of in your face, that people feel comfortable with, and then meeting with people. I like that you're breaking it down, too. I think that's a really good hack to say, instead of just getting in front of 30 or 40 or 50 staff members, I'm going to break them down into small groups and work from there. So it sounds like you are hacking leadership. If you can give us just one of those things that you sort of worked your way through it, hacked it, and thought, okay, this is a real learning experience for me as a leader?
So, I'm trying to facilitate technology and really hoping to give my teachers these tools. So we did something called Wacky Wednesdays. And on Wednesdays, it was optional. Teachers could stay and share. And it went really well. People would stay and they would, say, hey, I'm doing Schoolology. So they would show that, or Google Classroom or Kahoot or whatever. Just be a quick little 15-minute show and tell kind of thing. And so I'm thinking, this is great. And every time I did a staff meeting, I would model something. I mean, it might just be like a little silly way to make videos, or just something tacky. And I'm just thinking, this is great. I'm showing them all this stuff, and I'm excited about it, and I'm seeing some of the stuff get used in classrooms. And then one of my very trusted teachers comes to me and she says, Mrs. Austin, the teachers are just really overwhelmed. You are just giving them too much. Well, I'm just thinking, I'm like really giving these people some great tools. It wasn't really translating that way. So they were starting to feel like, it was too much pressure. I was asking them to do all of these things in their classroom. So there was a little bit of, a communication breakdown, because that really wasn't a goal at all to say, hey, here's, 50 tools and you have to use them all. But just kind of to throw some things out. But like half of my staff were first-year teachers. So they're stressed anyway. And they're, of course, as a first-year teacher, you want to make sure your principal is very, very happy. So that was kind of a moment for me where I was like, what?
Right. You feel like you're doing something revolutionary, You're on the cutting edge, and you're like, I've got so much to share. And it sounds like you have the enthusiasm to go in and say, man, I've got so much to give to this staff. And then you learn that it's too much. It's overwhelming. How did you deal with that? And what would you do moving forward?
Well, I licked my wounds a little bit. And then I just slowed it down, and I just just talk to them openly and let them know, hey, I'm not saying by any way, shape, or form that you need to do all of these things. I just want to give you tools. And so then I sort of flipped it around and said, tell me what you need. I did develop a badge system where they could kind of work at their own pace. So I gave them some incentive. My superintendent was generous enough to attach some money to those badges. Then it made it be more at their pace.
So did they earn the badges based on learning technology?
They did. I created a real quick Google form and basically just asked, what app are you using? How long have you been using it? And then, just a few little questions about how they're using it in the classroom. Will they continue to use it? What was the response from the kids? And then those just came to me through the Google Forms.
That's awesome. Now, then do your teachers have an opportunity to share that? What popped into my head immediately was the pineapple chart hack from the book Hacking Education, where staff members share the pineapple, being that symbol of welcome, where staff members invite people in to say, hey, I'm doing this or that today. Maybe I'm using this cool tool. And if you just want to see how it works, it's not an evaluation or anything. There's no pressure. It's just come in and see how this works. And that's been really popular. And that jumped into my head when you talked about those badges where someone could walk by and say, oh, she knows how to use Kahoot, and I'd really like to do that. Is there any system like that in place?
We haven't yet, but we definitely are working towards that for the next year.
It sounds like you've got some great things going on. Now, Naomi, as I said in the beginning of the show, we're really big believers at Hack Learning in providing all stakeholders with what you can do tomorrow solutions. There's so much research and philosophy in education, and it's not that that's not important, but sometimes that can be overwhelming, sort of like you tools were for a minute for your teachers, before you hacked that problem. So what we like is, hey, here's something that people in the trenches are doing that works that you could do tomorrow. So let's go back again to that point of view of the new leader, whether it's first year, second year, or third, a new leader who's heading into a new year with staff and maybe changes or who knows what. What are some things you would say to a new leader that they should think about doing right away when they walk into the building for a new year?
Well, the number one thing that I would advise anyone going into leadership is to make sure you have a good safety net, to make sure you have mentors, people that you can call on the phone and you're not worried about how they're going to judge your reaction. Or, as a first year person going into elementary and never being in, I'm a pretty confident person, but there was still a little bit of me going, can I really do this? Am I going to be successful? And a little bit of me worrying about how am I being perceived? Are people thinking, what does she know about elementary? She's never, just that ugly self-talk. And you have to have people that you can talk to very candidly. They can talk you down off the ledge.
Right.
and not be worried, that your job's on the line because you look incompetent, but be able to call somebody and say, you know what, I don't know how to handle this. Can you help me?
That's
I
great.
was very fortunate to have a great safety net. And not only for me, but I've built relationships with principals locally that I can take my teachers, because we're very rural, so collaboration gets hard. I can take my teachers to other classrooms, and we've got some visits scheduled next year.
Yeah, that's great to have those people, that safety net right there. What would you tell the people who don't feel they have it right there, or if they don't know if they have it?
You know me, so I'm really big with Twitter connections.
Right.
But I was fortunate enough to stumble across the admin2be hashtag, and I formed some good relationships with people. I think Colin is somebody that and I met him through that hashtag. But I mean, there were people in New Jersey and Iowa that I was calling even during the interview process. Not calling, but talking to
on Twitter.
Yeah, direct messaging.
And what's that hashtag?
That was admin2be. So the number 2, the letter B.
Oh, and okay, great. Yeah, I want to add that to the show notes at hacklearningpodcast.com. That's tremendous. Admin2be. So hashtags, finding places like that. Hashtag hacking leadership has become pretty big now since the release of the book. So these are places you would tell people to go to and to ask these questions.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't even know what Genius Hour was until I got on Twitter.
I learned all about you and met you on Twitter before we met face to face. So it is such a powerful place, to meet people and to find people who are like-minded, to help you. I love what you say about that safety net. And then you can just reach out to them. So you just message people and say, hey, I need some help.
I was talking to a guy that's been a mentor to me. And I told him the things, I said, here are these struggles, and here I'm reflective, and sometimes I'm a little bit too critical of myself. And so I'm like kind of criticizing myself, like I wish I would have done this different. I should have done better here. And then I said, but these are some really awesome things that have happened. And I started naming off some really great things. And he said, are you telling people that story? And he said, when you talk to your superintendent, do you tell him those things, or you just talk about the things you should be doing better? And I was like, it was a big kick in the pants, because he goes, you're telling your story. And if you're only talking about the stuff that you could have done better, then that's the story that's getting out there. You have to be able to toot your own horn, especially when it's not I did something great, but my staff is doing these great things.
Yeah, that's great. Accentuate the positive. And you're talking about your story, and that's really how we started. That brings us full circle. Your story, and then continuing to tell the story. What marvelous advice, and to really focus on the positive. Naomi, I think people are going to listen to this show, and they're going to be enlightened, first of all, about any leader, whether they're new or veteran. They've got some things they can use here. And we've talked about connecting on Twitter, and I just think some people are going to say, wow, I'd really like to connect with her some more. Tell them where they can find you.
Well, my Twitter handle is Austin, ELA, as in English Language Arts, and the number 8, because I taught 8th grade English.
There you go. Austin, ELA 8. And of course, we will put that on the show notes where we'll highlight this conversation. We'll link it so people can click right through to you on Twitter and continue the conversation. We will do this again in the future.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you. As always, we continue the conversation at #HackLearning on Twitter and on the show notes page at hacklearningpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.